Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week. Voter ID not this time around, though, of course, an appeal is automatic. Michael Hiblin joins us from KUAR, where he's news director for public radio in Central Arkansas. Lance Turner, reporter, columnist for Arkansas Business. Ernie Dumas, an independent journalist and columnist for Arkansas Times. Michael, I have his honor's opinion here, and there's a lot of pink in there where I highlighted that. He couldn't have killed it any deader with a shotgun, I suppose.
Yeah, interesting. Tim Fox, circuit judge for Pulaski County, declared the state's voter ID law passed by the legislature last year void and unenforceable. This case only had to do specifically with absentee ballots and those that were submitted without proof of an ID. But Judge
While
Fox,
he was at it.
while he was at it, just read through it and just decided this whole thing is unconstitutional, namely because it adds a requirement to be eligible to vote beyond what's specified in the Constitution. He cited case law that said any legislative action to enact voter qualifications outside the 4 points spelled out in the Constitution isn't constitutional. So he issued this ruling. The case itself had actually originated from the Pulaski County Election Commission. It was responding to a decision, a rule put in place by the State Board of Election Commissioners, because the legislature failed to put in a policy for how to handle absentee voters who didn't include this. And the Pulaski County Election Commission didn't feel that was the place, that should have been done by the legislature, and they filed this. There was already another case that was pending, filed a week ago. First hearing on that was going to be a week ago, or a week from today. But Judge Fox went ahead and issued this ruling, and I'm not sure the status of the other case at this point.
Moot, Ernie?
Well, this ruling was not unanticipated. In fact, I think it was widely anticipated since the bill was filed a year ago. In fact, the governor vetoed the bill because he said it was unconstitutional, basically on these grounds. But this particular case was not about the constitutionality of the photo ID law, but as Michael said, simply about some technical aspects of it. Obviously, it had some weaknesses. There was a confusion about absentee voters and what absentee votes should be counted. So this particular lawsuit was to try to settle those issues. Some rules adopted by the State Board of Election Commissioners. But while he was at it, in effect, what Judge Fox did is just went back and embraced all the arguments that were in the lawsuit filed a week ago by the American Civil Liberties Union and the Arkansas Public Law Center, saying that this whole amendment was unconstitutional because it added additional requirements to vote beyond those provided in the Constitution. So now I don't know what will happen. This ruling obviously will be immediately appealed to the Arkansas Supreme Court, particularly the injunction part of it, saying that you can't enforce it during this election in May. But then you've got this other case coming along next week in which all of these arguments are advanced. I guess presumably he'll make the same ruling in that case a week from today or whenever. So anyway, it'll be a question for the Supreme Court. Can they use this particular ruling to throw it out? I think eventually they will throw out the amendment saying that it's unconstitutional, but this may not be the vehicle for them to do that.
In other words, a remand and say, wait a minute, you're right in part, but...
that could be. But then they've got this second case coming along, right, in which he may issue the same injunction a week from now or shortly thereafter. Then that case might raise the issue sufficiently for the Supreme Court to uphold the whole thing.
What's interesting to me is that the ruling seems to say that outside of the registration period, 30 days before you can vote, you can't put any other requirements on a voter. So it would seem to me that to require a voter to show up on election day and show an ID in the state of Arkansas in order to vote, that's not possible. That it seems like he's saying the only place you can add an ID requirement is within that registration window 30 days before you can vote. So to me, it kind of throws into question, like, how would the legislature then, if they really wanted to pursue a voter ID law, how would they go about doing that?
Well, he kind of addresses that. The voter registration amendment, Amendment 51 of the Constitution, which was, I think, adopted in 1964, spells out all the procedures about how you register to vote, all the various qualifications and how you go about, very specifically, how you go about registering to vote. But then it says at the end of it that sections 5 through 16 or whatever can be amended by the Constitution, by the legislature, by a 2/3 vote of each house, as long as these additional requirements are in sync with the purpose of the amendment. So the legislature, if they'd gotten a 2/3 vote, passed this bill, which they didn't, that argument might not have held. So it remains to be seen. They can come back next year if this is thrown out and try it again and get a 2/3 vote, which they might be able to do with a larger Republican majority in the House and Senate. But that's questionable.
Well, and of course, this was an initiative, a legislative initiative of it was Michael, I don't want to say a cornerstone, but it was a very important part of the Republican legislative package.
Yeah, and this says similar laws have been passed around the country. Similar to this, with Republicans saying we need to address the potential for voter fraud. Democrats essentially saying this is a non-issue. There hasn't really been any widespread fraud, and saying it's just an attempt to disenfranchise people who predominantly vote Democratic. And the backers of this bill in the legislature immediately objected to this. Bruce Westerman, a co-sponsor of the bill, said last night that he strongly disagreed that a law duly passed by the legislature was unenforceable. And worth noting, too, that Attorney General McDaniel had said in February that it was not the place of the state election board to make this rule, that it needed to have been included in the law. But his office said last night that they are looking at this. They anticipate filing an appeal as soon as possible. And whether or not that happens before the primary scheduled for May 20th remains to be seen.
And in the politics of it, that figured into it, too, as the state Republican chair, among others, doubted publicly the level of brio that the Attorney General would bring to the task of mounting an appeal.
That's right. In this case and in other cases as well. You know, you've had this is the second piece of Republican legislation that's been thrown out, or I guess thrown out by the court. You've had the abortion ruling in March, the 12-week abortion ban that was also done away with as well. And in both those cases, I think the Republican Party has wondered, to what degree is a Democrat, Dustin McDaniel, going to rigorously defend and appeal all of these cases.
And there's a third case we should mention as well, and that's the initiative and referendum. The changes to the initiative and referendum process also got thrown. It was a Republican-sponsored bill. Well, it got Democratic support as well, but it was thrown out as well by the court, and so the Attorney General is having to defend all of those statutes in the courts. So, and as you say, the Republicans are wondering whether he can bring his full enthusiasm to defending these statutes.
It was interesting in Judge Fox's ruling that he did note that it is it's a good thing that the legislature is taking pains to make sure that that the voting process is secure. There's a line in there that specifically says, it's not a bad thing.
No reasonable
for us
person, I think, would argue with it.
Right. Yeah. So that was kind of an interesting little side note that he threw in there.
Numbers of another sort, and Michael, they're numbers for both, I suppose, opponents and advocates of the Arkansas private option approach. It may cost more, at least for the near term, per policy than projected. But, well, you can take it from there.
Yeah, this was brought out this week, and a key point during a hearing Thursday by the Joint Public Health, Welfare, and Labor Committee. what we're learning is that costs are slightly above what had been projected per person, per the amount, about $20 or so per month above what had been expected. We had an actuary firm or representative who's working with the Department of Human Services who said that, well, we're just getting started. We're only really 4 months into this. There are changes that are being implemented. There are a lot of factors that still have to be worked out, and suggested that costs will be coming down. But some Republicans, especially those who had opposed the private option, are saying that this shows this is going to end up costing the state a lot more than had been expected, especially once we get a few years down the road as the state picks up more and more of the cost of this. But officials saying basically, things are being worked out, changes are in the works. This is an ongoing thing, and that as we get further along in the process, the expenses will go down.
Another piece of news out of that was that you, hopefully by 2015, will have 4 companies in the state offering insurance programs in every county of the state, which is something that has also been a concern. Is there going to be enough competition among these insurance companies to do things like control the costs? So Jay Bradford's hopeful that by 2015, in addition to the 2 Blue Crosses, you'll also have 2 additional companies, Qual Choice and another that does business as Ambetter Arkansas, offering policies in every county of the state. There does seem to be this. There will be a conversation down the road in terms of these the what's included in the policies, the benchmark policies, the policy, what you have to have a good policy, minimum coverage requirements, and how that will affect prices going forward.
And part of that involves dental and vision programs involved in this. Also, the insurance commissioner said there very well may be a 5th company that enters the state to do business, and saying overall that this is good news, that this means there will be more competition, lower prices, more options.
Basically, at this point, if I understand everything correctly, the BB administration, the Department of Human Services, the insurance department, and advocates of the private option, particularly its Republican advocates, are saying what we're doing here is, I don't want to say just tinkering around the edges, but basically that's it. We're fine-tuning as we go this program. We still have confidence in this program, in this approach, which is good news, I guess, to most of the clinical community in Arkansas, which looking forward to some relief, Ernie.
I think so. I think it's altogether nearly all good news for the people who pushed the private option, and those who went along with it in the administration. I think it's almost altogether good news. We're going to expanded competition to cover all 75 counties next year probably. The costs are within range. 150,000 people have already enrolled in Medicaid. That's roughly 150,000 people who did not have health insurance a few months ago, who are now have health insurance for the first time. Great news for all the hospitals. The hospitals and clinicians around the state are happy with that, which is going to mean that much lower unreimbursed costs for the hospitals, much less charitable care for the hospitals and clinics. So I think it's pretty much altogether good news. As David Sanders, formerly of this show, and now I guess one of the 2 or 3 chief sponsors of the Medicaid expansion and the private option, he was happy about it all and thinks it's been an amazing success.
And also, out of the 155,000 or so that are signed up and approved for this, it's expected that more younger people are going to get into this. Part of Thursday's hearing also mentioned that in other states where this is being done, they've seen as the process goes along, younger people tend to be signing up a little later in the process. And it's expected that about 250,000 Arkansans are eligible for this, and out of that, about 155,000, as Ernie said, have signed up at this point. So still pretty good pool of people who haven't signed up that are considered eligible.
And I suspect by the end of the year, into this the calendar year, there'll probably be 200,000 people, which will be perhaps 80% or more of all the uninsured people in Arkansas who are below 138% of the poverty line. So when the legislature assembles next year, I think they'll face that issue with nearly everybody covered. And if you end the private option, then you throw 200,000 people out of health insurance.
To shift gears ever so slightly, and I mean ever so slightly, into the purely political arena. A great deal of back and forth this past week over a new national survey, Michael, which indicated the incumbent Democratic senator from Arkansas, who stands for re-election this year, Mr. Pryor, had widened a lead that was suggested in several earlier polls, and conducted only a few days prior to that. There was, of course, some grumbling from Republicans, complaints from the Republican opposition. Oh, the poll wasn't thorough, or it was flawed in one way or another. And yet, a lot of people around the state report anecdotally, that they sensed things moving a bit more toward Mr. Pryor than they were.
Yeah, this was a pretty dramatic poll and got a lot of national debate from people questioning the poll conducted by the New York Times and the Kaiser Family Foundation, showing that Pryor had grown his lead to 10%. Most of the previous polls, I believe 6 out of 7 lately, have had Pryor with a slight lead, most usually within the margin of error. But this brought up a huge debate about the legitimacy of this poll. They looked at other factors like how many people said they actually voted in 2012, the number of people who said that they voted for the president versus Mitt Romney. And essentially, a key part of it was a very small number of people in Arkansas in this poll, the percentage, said they voted for Romney as opposed to those who actually did. Romney won the state by, I think, 24%, whereas in this, it was just a few votes different. And that brought up the debate, well, do people, when you're talking about losing candidate a year and a half after the election, that people don't always acknowledge that they voted for that person, sometimes say they didn't vote for it. But anyway, it really gave a bit of a momentum for Mark Pryor and suggested Cotton really isn't picking up a lot of traction.
And of course, the basis for the survey was targeted at 4 states with 4 senators at risk, including Mr. Pryor. And there were a number of questions that involved health care reform, Ernie, and it seemed to suggest, the survey results, assuming validity, it seemed to suggest that people are, that the anti-Obamacare, ACA furor is subsiding a little bit.
In those 4 states, that's true, and nationwide as well, but not quite as much in Arkansas. There's still more antipathy to the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act in Arkansas than in nearly every other state in the country, and that's still kind of reflective in the polls.
And yet, repeal it and keep it and improve it is just neck and neck.
Well, that's what the polls show, and they've showed something like that all along. That when you ask people, do you favor Obamacare, it's always been fairly decisively negative. But now it's fairly close. But when they ask people, do you want to just throw it out altogether? Do you want to repeal Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act? Slightly more say no, they don't want to throw it out, than say, and they would say, yeah, fix it. It's got some problems, fix it, but don't repeal it.
48-46,
48-46, and I think probably in Arkansas it's probably a bigger number than that. That's not an Arkansas figure, I think, was it? That's in the 4 states. I forgot.
I would have to go back in there and take a look, but I think it may be Arkansas. But they're buried down in here in the crosstabs was something else that I thought unusual. They were giving Arkansas respondents a choice, 4 options, and the top 2 came back. Do you want to expand government programs such as Medicaid to include more people, or would you like to use, another option would be, do you want to use federal government funds to buy private insurance for people? And those 2 combined were 75%.
And that's Obamacare. Those 2 issues, those 2 remedies are Obamacare. All the rest, the other issues, in Obamacare are all highly favorable. 80 to 90% of people favor the other elements of it. But those are the two controversial issues: expanding Medicaid or providing tax credit subsidies to people under 400% of the poverty line to help them buy insurance. Those are the two controversial features of Obamacare, and there the polls show that when you ask people those kinds of questions, they love it. That's what they favor doing. So as we talked before the show, it's all about the question, how you frame the questions, and again, how you frame ads.
And am I drawing? Would we be, would we be drawing too much of a conclusion by suggesting that those numbers indicate that Arkansas people are saying, okay, do something, don't do nothing? They've had mayors, county judges, aldermen, everyone, particularly out in the less populated parts of the state, pointing to their local hospital, which is, burning, trailing oil on life support. And they're warning them, this can't continue. These hospitals can't continue to do this unreimbursed care. Yeah. In the meantime, your premiums are going up, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always been a recognition that the system as it wasn't working and needed some kind of repair. I think we've always known as well that as more people engage with the system, as more people get enrolled and deal with it and use it in everyday life and see kind of how it works, that there may be a different outcome. Their attitudes may change about Obamacare. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors kind of at play there. But Republicans, again, will point out, this is a New York Times poll, which they love to show. And then, it's still dicey for certain senators in certain states. In North Carolina, Kay Hagan, still very close race there. Mary Landrieu in Louisiana has, you can't have enough Republicans lining up to run against her there. And Obamacare, a candidate's support of Obamacare still is a deciding factor in an election, and that's why, Pryor's careful with it. Other Democrats are careful with it, even though Democrats in other parts of the country are starting to say, maybe we should really trumpet Obamacare's successes and maybe embrace it and see where it takes us in the fall.
Obamacare is still the central Republican strategy for taking the U.S. Senate and expanding its base in the House of Representatives. I saw a report from this organization that tracks all of the political ads in the country, and it said that 76% of all the Republican ads in the country in all the congressional races for the Senate and the House of Representatives, 76% of those ads attack Obamacare, and I suspect an even higher percentage mention Obama in some other way. So Obama and Obamacare is the strategy. Now that might be changing. These surveys showing that polls, it may reflect that, well, maybe people are getting tired of Obamacare. I don't know whether people get tired of those negative ads or not, but that's that's the strategy, and I think still the strategy.
And Asa Hutchinson's first big ad is talking about Nancy Pelosi, Obama, and Obamacare and health care. I've always been against it. I will continue to fight against it, even though getting him to talk about the private option in Arkansas was a challenge for many, many months.
But I think did not the same poll, Steve, did not the same poll show that Asa Hutchinson still has a slight lead over Mike Ross in Arkansas? The same poll showing Pryor with a 10-point lead showed Asa Hutchinson, the Republican, with a 1-point lead, which is clearly the margin of error in the governor's race in Arkansas.
Yeah, well, we know for a fact that the junior senator from Arkansas is a regular viewer of our broadcast, so Senator, if you're watching a heartfelt bipartisan get well soon, the senator had a serious heart scare. His colleagues, and we assume recovery is proceeding apace, well, certainly we hope so, when his colleagues in Washington, particularly the Republican National Committee and in Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, when he says get well soon, they're very sincere about that.
Yeah, well, for a senator to vote on a measure before the full chamber, the senator has to be there to actually cast the vote. A senator can vote by proxy for some committee measures, but this is something that, they need Senator Boozman there, especially with Republicans in the minority. But word is the senator is recovering. He's doing well, was moved out of ICU and into a private room Thursday. This acute aortic dissection, which involves a tear, a very serious condition, but word is that Senator Boozman is seeming to make a good recovery.
Need him for the majority, too.
Well, but the thing is that there are no serious votes coming up in the Senate, I guess, all year long. So he can have a casual and lengthy recovery, I think, and they will not miss him in the Senate. Well, they will miss him, but his vote will not be necessary to keep the Republicans in traces for the rest of them.
Given that she chauffeured him to the hospital in the early morning hours, we would suggest, Senator, that Mrs. Boozman is entitled to a very nice Mother's Day. And with that, we're out of time. Thanks to you for yours, and we'll see you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.